Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer Lezak, Coordinator of Special Projects with the Adult Services Department. And on behalf of everyone at the Chicago Public Library, welcome. This event is part of the 2021 One Book, One Chicago season, exploring the theme Neighborhoods, Our City's Bedrock, and the book Bedrock Faith by Eric Charles May. Please visit onebookonechicago.org for other upcoming programs, reading recommendations, on-demand video content, and more coming now through the end of the year. This program is possible, and One Book, One Chicago is generously funded by donations to the Chicago Public Library Foundation. Visit cplfoundation.org for information on how you can get involved with their work. Today, we ask the question, what was Chicago like in 1993? Author and urbanologist Max Grinnell looks into news stories about the cultural and social milieu around the city. As an urbanologist, geographer, historian, and professor, Max finds his purpose in describing, critiquing, and analyzing the urban condition. He's an expert on urban design, planning, public art, the creative economy, and the history of cities, and has written several books, including Hyde Park, Illinois, and 24 Great Walks in Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Max Grinnell. Welcome, Max.
Hi, Jennifer. So great to be here with you all today. And it's been an interesting time working on these programs. I came to Chicago in 1994. Moved to Chicago to start college at the University of Chicago. So this is kind of part of my own personal history within the city and thinking about what makes Chicago unique and unusual. And it's funny because I talk to folks, maybe they're 15, 20, 30 years older than myself, and they say, well, you just got here. And I talk to my students who weren't even alive in the early, late 90s. And they say sometimes, wow, it seems like such a distant past. And so much has happened to the city, and within the city, they have changed it. External forces, in migration, out migration, different technologies, smartphones, changing in the socioeconomic profile of the city. There's so much to think about and consider. So when I thought about this program, I thought about things that have meant a lot to me and how people understood and parsed out the city. Having worked for and with a number of newspapers during my lifetime, I decided to look at some of the pages from the Chicago Tribune, and looking around, we were so lucky in many ways to have the vastness of the internet, looking around to find some programs that capture some of these moments: radio, television, cultural change, some of the city's sports moments, and also some of the city's ongoing challenges with dealing with poverty, and so on and so forth. So this is meant to be suggestive and not exhaustive of some of those things. So even on the back end, when you watch this video later, you might even drop some thoughts in the comments, things that you remember from this time period, or, as is commonly the case with comments, things that I forgot. So without further ado, Deadly End to Deadly Year. This was an article that appeared on January 1st, 1993 in the Chicago Tribune. Obviously a much larger print edition. And of course, in 1993, there were only print editions to the Tribune. One of the things that dominated the popular narrative about Chicago, certainly, really since the city's founding, is around crime and violence. And as this article starts, I'll read the headline at the start of the article. Deadly End to Deadly Year, 934th victim, part of a record homicide rate. Just after midnight on the last day of 1992, Laura and Michael Green were put through a grim routine that hundreds of other Chicagoans faced last year. On the third floor of Cook County Hospital, the couple were led to a stainless steel gurney where a clean white sheet covered the body of a young man. And this was a couple that had come to take a last, or not a last look, but a look at their son, who had died from a gunshot wound. So certainly this is one of the narratives, not the only narrative, that was part of how Chicago was understood to the outside world. And of course, there was a lot of different coverage of violence and crime and related matters And of course, many people would take exception to the way that the Chicago Tribune had traditionally covered crime and violence. And it was overall the late 80s and early 90s were tough times for the city in terms of other media outlets calling it the murder capital of the world, etc. And I start with this not so much because I believe this to be true. It's of course not true. Chicago is not the murder capital of the world, but it is part of how the city is known to outsiders, and a narrative that other outlets have sought to change in recent years. There was an interesting little infographic that accompanied this article that talked about the number of homicides by district, and by district here you had number 11 Harrison, number 2 Wentworth, Englewood, Austin, Pullman, so on and so forth. So this is one of those ways as well in which kind of the data was visualized. Obviously, this is much more common in terms of thinking about how newspapers and other digital media outlets talk about these stories. One of the things that I thought was interesting, if we think about what makes up Chicago then and now, your mind would probably turn then to large department stores. This is a full-page ad, one of many full-page ads taken out for the January 1st, 1993 edition of the Chicago Tribune, trumpeting a 25% discount on already reduced clearance merchandise at Marshall Field's. Of course, Marshall Field, the man who would come from Western Massachusetts to ply his commercial trade in the middle of the 19th century, would probably be hard to recognize. Of course, the department store landscape in Chicago in 2021. In the early 1990s, there were no less than 5 department stores in the Loop. And of course, depending on how you count department stores, whether you count the City Target, formerly Carson Pirie Scott, or not, you might think that there is 1 department store left in the Loop. And of course, that is the Marshall Fields building, which is now home to Macy's. Also tied in with this story is the fact that print newspapers rely heavily on department store advertisements, automobile advertisements, classifieds, etc. So you would not be surprised to learn, as I counted through the digitized edition of the January 1st print Chicago Tribune, that there were over 74 pages of advertisements. Really a tremendous number. Another story from the January 1st edition of the Tribune was something that Chicago continues to deal with, and there have been a lot of kind of policy changes around this, is a news item that notes city schools could lose $107 million in state aid. Unlike other major cities around the United States in the early to mid 90s, some of which were taken over by different authorities because they were bankrupt or performing so poorly, Chicago public schools managed to avoid this, though there was still a tremendous spending gap. And of course, one of the conversations that's gone on throughout the city and Chicagoland more generally since the early 90s is how to stem the movement of young people away from public schools, and also think about how to transform, as they say, underperforming educational systems. And of course, one of the challenges within Chicago has been also the decline of the parochial school system and the removal of different groups of people, right? You want to have a large base of support for your public schools, and there certainly is a base of support. Of course, the question is, how can they find more money? And of course, that story goes far beyond the conversations we'll have today, but it is certainly a problem and a conundrum that is with us 30 years on. One of the other interesting ways that in my own work, teaching urban design, urban history, to parse out the world around us is to think about the visual histories, the visual stories that photographic archives tell us. And one of the things that I always like to share with folks is some of the work that goes on through the Chicago Collections. Chicago Collections is a consortium of over a dozen Chicago area organizations that have created a tremendous archive of online materials. One of them is the William C. Brubaker collection. William C. Brubaker was a photographer, an architect who documented the city as he found it. And he also had a tremendous interest in Michigan Avenue. Now, of course, today, if you think of Michigan Avenue during COVID, there certainly has been a lot of concern about what's next for the Magnificent Mile. And in the early 90s, one of the conversations was that the Magnificent Mile was being reborn. There were over a dozen new buildings that were built starting in the late 80s until the mid 90s on Michigan Avenue. And it really was almost kind of a second renaissance for this very grand shopping boulevard. One of my favorite pictures is of this building on the west side of Michigan Avenue, the Terra Museum of American Art, which regrettably no longer exists. It's now the Terra Foundation, and they do a lot of important work. Terra Museum was a free museum on Michigan Avenue. You can go see a wide range of collections. One of the few free things to do on Michigan Avenue, and it is no longer with us, but I remember fondly enjoying this wonderful place. Certainly one of the other stories in the early 90s in Chicago, as it always has been new retail developments. Chicago Place, which is a mall finished a few years before this, before 1993, was one of these tremendous kind of outpouring of retail kind of confidence. At one point, it had a mall within it up until fairly recently, with over 15 different high-end stores, including Saks Fifth Avenue. The mall section has been closed for quite some time. And like a lot of other retail during our own time here in 2021, the conversation is what will be next, what will happen next for all these large spaces. Probably one of my favorite places, and if you get a chance and have not been in a while, a building that really changed the face of Michigan Avenue in the early 90s was the architect Robert A.M. Stern's Banana Republic, designed in what was referred to as a type of neo-colonial style. The idea behind this building, its amazing interior, and anyone who knows about architectural design or interior design knows that these things cycle through quite quickly, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's one of these early 1990s interior was that Stern had been given the charge to create a new flagship store for Banana Republic in Chicago. And he really went full tilt by kind of looking at the color scheme of what you might consider a jungle or tropical landscape, terms that today we might choose to avoid. But it's really kind of a tremendous space. Well, moving away from the built environment and thinking about the stories that Chicagoans were telling about each other, I want to share with you this rather remarkable little clip from a program called Chicago Slices. Chicago Slices ran on WCIU for a couple of years in the early 90s. And along their way, throughout their journey, they really went to celebrate Chicagoans as they found them. On the street interviews, they interviewed people on the L, they interviewed people fishing in back of the lagoon, in back of the Museum of Science and Industry. They were out and about on the street talking to everyday Chicagoan. Let's go back in time, friends. Take a look at this Chicago Slices from July 15th, 1993.
Hey, I'm Andrew Jones, and this is a slice of Chicago. slice.
Hi, I would like to tell you about a collection consisting of over 23,000 pairs of cufflinks.
What you're about to see is the largest collection of cufflinks in the world. In fact, this 23,000 pair cufflink collection is on file with the Guinness Book of World Records. We're very proud of it. And this is a very eclectic collection. Here's a pair that reflects an artist's palette. Someone that's into bowling would be very comfortable in this pair of cufflinks. Here's a pair of cufflinks that illustrate wrestling. Here's a pair of cufflinks that a dog or a pet lover might purchase for himself. Here's a pair of dazzling cufflinks that would be suitable for male or female wear. Liberace might have worn cufflinks that looked of this type. But you know, with males being liberated today, a lot of men will wear something just that dynamic with their formal wear. But some collectors collect only single cufflinks.
That's going to be kind of disappointing when you lose one of the pair. I mean, you can't wear a mixed pair, can you?
Well, Frank, we know people that do that. It's not common. There are many people that collect singles with the hope that one day they're going to find the mate. I suspect they're the romanticists among cufflink collectors.
What are you fishing for?
Fish.
Don't get funny on me, Emma. So how long you been out here this morning?
Oh, about 30 minutes.
And you caught anything yet?
No.
You gonna catch anything?
Hope so.
What are you gonna do with it when you catch it?
Eat it.
How you gonna cook it?
Fried.
With what? Tell me about it.
Oh, cornmeal, hot oil, salt and pepper.
Does it taste good?
Of course. That's why I'm so fat. You fall off in that water, you know.
Hey, Emma. Smile.
Well, friends, one of the other issues in the early 1990s was what to do about gambling in the city of Chicago. Obviously, there had been gambling before in the city of Chicago. Those who read early accounts of the city's history, there was gambling at Fort Dearborn. We don't know if Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable was a gambler, but there was certainly a long tradition of gambling and related activities in the city. But as the city looked around for new revenue streams in the late 1980s with ongoing financial problems, Chicago Public School District, et cetera, there was another proposal, which is the riverboat gambling. Obviously, like a lot of other things, it came down to the then mayor, Richard M. Daley, and Governor Jim Edgar, sometimes butting heads about what would happen in terms of riverboat gambling. Places like Iowa had already had riverboat gambling. And of course, as the city in 2021 continues to explore options for more traditional large casino experience, that which is old is new again. So this is another thing that found its way into this coverage within 1993 as this issue came up. And of course, as probably some folks with a knowledge of Chicago history can tell you, is that there had long been conversations about having a casino on Navy Pier. Another thing that I noticed and found interesting was the way in which the Tribune also had profiles and vignettes of neighborhoods, conversations about the Asian American heritage along Argyle Street, which in 2021 is one of Chicago's first complete streets, designed to accommodate persons of all abilities. An update on jazz and jazz at the Jazz Showcase. Jazz Showcase is still with us in Dearborn Station. An homage to the end of Cheers. Update on financial services, and of course, Chicago weather. One of the other interesting things, and I'm sure if those of you remember more of the halcyon days of terrestrial radio, was the ways in which people experienced music. You know, of course, there were musical theaters, live venues all around the city in the early 1990s, but terrestrial radio, which Chicago has had a longstanding history of vibrant radio stations, including WGN, WLS, The Loop, and many others. But two people who really ruled the airwaves during this time period on WBBM B96 were Eddie and JoBo. Eddie and JoBo had been on air for many years by the time this air check appeared in 1993. And they referred to their audience as the world's most dangerous audience. Their humor was peppered with inside jokes, parodies of Chicago personalities. And of course, famously or infamously, they were the only Chicago DJs ever fired for implying that a well-known TV news anchor had been impregnated by a member of the Chicago Bulls. They were on the air for 24 years, which feels like a lifetime. And in today's iHeartRadio market, probably feels like many lifetimes. So what I'd like to do is play a little bit of a clip of Eddie and JoBo doing their thing on April Fool's Day in 1993. Now, remind you, to set up this clip, they were mostly known for kind of loud, cantankerous on-air personalities playing popular radio, top 40 music. So on this day, they decided to flip the script and offer a little bit more genteel version of their morning show. And their famous announcer, woman named Karen Hand, who is another Chicago radio legend, is still around. She is now a hypnotherapist in 2021. So here's a little bit of brief segment of Eddie and JoBo doing their thing on Drive Time Radio, April Fool's Day, 1993.
It is 6:30 at WBBM FM, Chicago Classical B96. It will be very windy today. You'll need a scarf to cover your hair. You'll need a hat to cover your head and keep in the warmth in your body. Flurries likely. 34 is today's high. Right now it is 30 degrees with a wind chill 2 degrees below zero. Find out where to get free, confidential HIV testing and counseling. Call the Chicago Health Outreach Program. And for the Chicagoland Restaurant Review, we turn to our food editor on the move.
Hello, I'm Dag Malpaca with this week's Restaurant Review. Over the weekend, I paid a visit to the Café Las Bellas Artes in downtown Elmhurst. The one thing that really stuck out in my mind and my mouth was the appetizer. Escargot with herb brie and garlic paste. Personally, I'd never liked snails before, but let me tell you, it really knocks your socks off. That's this week's Restaurant Review. Next week, Shoney's of Villa Park. I'm Dagmar Paco.
That's news and information on classical WBBM FM. I'm Karen Hand, returning to Joseph Bohannon and Edward Volkman.
6:31 in the Windy City. Let me tell you, the Chicagoland Cadillac dealers put a little smile on your face this morning with a classical Mistrioli. A lot of you scratching your heads this morning, but we may have corralled a winner here at 591-9696. Let's go right to the phones now. Sir, what do you think that classic Mistrioli was?
That's from the final movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
It is from the final movement of Beethoven's Ninth. Very good. What's your name, sir?
My name is John.
John what?
Serrano.
And what do you do, John?
I'm a student.
John, we're going to send a pair of tickets to you to see the Virtuosity Chicago Piano and String Ensemble performing works of Beethoven, Schumann, and Chasson, April 28th at the Civic Opera House.
Yeah, baby.
John, you have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Do you have someone you're going to take with you to that night?
Yeah.
It is going to be an inspirational night. We hope you enjoy it and think of us as you enjoy that show.
Oh, you bet I will.
Listen, have a great day, and thank you for listening to Classic 96.
No problem.
6:32. Well, we teased you a little bit. We should play the entire version of the classic Mistrioli. Here it is. This is from the final movement of Beethoven's Ninth in D minor. It's 6:33. You're waking up to the classic sounds of Classic 96. WBBM FM B96.
Of course, Eddie and JoBo were not the only popular radio DJs around. There were folks on WGCI, V103, and a raft of other popular stations. But for many years, Eddie and JoBo dominated the drive time radio waves with their brand of, I won't say shock jock humor, but kind of humorous asides and parodies of Chicago personalities, and famously or infamously their own cracked up versions of popular songs, all of which are available in some form or another on YouTube. Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about sports. If you think about what defined or what has defined Chicago for many decades, starting in the 1920s, many people would say the Roaring 20s, Chicago's gangland culture and the personality of Al Capone and countless others. It was a cultural representation which many of the city fathers and mothers were not particularly happy about. There was, of course, a famous story that said that when someone would go abroad and say they were from Chicago, that people would make the motions of a Tommy gun and go rat-a-tat-tat. One of the people, along with his colleagues from the Chicago Bulls for so many years, that helped change this narrative was Michael Jordan. His charisma, his personality, his leadership, along with Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc, countless others, heralded a new image for Chicago, both in the city and externally. This article from the Tribune talks about the Bulls triumphing over the New York Knicks in 1993 and on their way to their first three-peat. Certainly a news item which dominated the headlines. It could not be avoided, even if one tried. One would say, a fan of another basketball team in the NBA, you could not hope to avoid it. One of the things that I will share with you now is a little bit of news coverage of one of the things that I think is so interesting about Chicago and any other big city is that urban spectacle of tens of thousands of people gathering in Grant Park to celebrate the Chicago Bulls.
They've got the super fans from Saturday Night Live will be the opening act up here, and we're frankly expecting them anytime as soon as they show up. Of course, we'll take one of our half a dozen cameras and take a look or two at them. We've got Special Events Director Jim Sheehan from the city of Chicago who's going to be doing some of the Master of Ceremonies chores, and after the super fans, he'll be introducing the Love of Bulls, Benny the Bull, the mascot, of course, and the Bulls brothers who did a great gig up there last year. That was fantastic. We're looking forward to more from them this year.
They're terrific, and there's another look from up on high there with a blimp, and you can see some of the crowd. And as they said, they started coming in the early morning hours, but we had a picture out here last night on the news after the White Sox game, and there were already people filling in the seat area. The only negative, Rick, is that all these people that you see there in your picture can't get down close to see their heroes. There's only room for about 42 or 4,500 down in the seating area.
That's right. The official seating capacity in the Petrillo Music Shell, this is the official capacity, is about 4,500. With the SROs, the standing room fans, you can expect that perhaps that has about been doubled to perhaps 8,000 to 9,000.
A fire marshal's nightmare down there.
Exactly right. We got the official version and the unofficial version. The unofficial version coming from one of our camera guys, Mike Prendergast. Officially, nobody was supposed to spend the night in the seats at the music shell.
Right.
Nobody was supposed to be allowed in until, say 7:30 this morning. But Chicago police are really, they serve and they protect. That is their motto. And they do it so very, very well, despite the occasional criticism that comes up. So when you get a fan or two that may want to drift in, they'll wink at them, they'll nod at them, and as long as everybody's cool, they were allowed to spend the night. So by 3 o'clock, when our crew started setting up here, and a wonderful job they've done, when our crew started setting up around 3 o'clock this morning, there were maybe 150 people already in these seats, and they were certainly allowed to spend the night, and surely they did.
Well, Rick, when it gets to be a routine, everybody's a little bit more relaxed about things, and of course, this is a routine, isn't it?
Chicago police are no less fans of the Chicago Bulls and of the fans of the Bulls than anybody else, so we have to tip our hat to them and to the fans. Understand Roseanne has somebody else for us back down in the crowd here at the music show. Roseanne?
Well, that's right, Rick. Not everybody has a message for the Bulls. Actually, they all have a message for the Bulls, but they have a message for the Suns, too. Look at this banner I just found. Hey, Barkley, God changed his mind. This sign put together by Marie. Marie, what's the message here?
Well, it was in relation to Charles Barkley saying that that God wanted his team to win, and we disagreed. We said God changed his mind. He wanted the Bulls to win.
No sympathy for the Suns, then.
Oh, not at all.
I see you also have some homemade shirts here. Let's look at this. 1993 World Champs. Homemade. How did you do this?
Well, we kind of took the pattern and we pressed it on with an iron. Then you got to outline it. No, I don't have it. How long Well, we just did it last night, so did it last about to dry and
them out.
Yeah.
Standing here. Well, they look great. Terrific job. The Bulls will appreciate it. So we'll keep chatting with the fans and check back with you in a little while. Back to you, Dan and Rick.
Okay, Roseanne, you know Charles had a couple of the great lines of the playoffs when he said he had that little conversation with God, and God said it was destiny for the Suns to win. Someone asked him about Michael Jordan, what Michael would have thought, and Charles said, well, Michael told me he read a different Bible.
That Barkley is great for a quote after quote after quote. Michael got in a few licks of his own, too, but he did his speaking pretty much on the floor.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was a terrific series, and Barkley showed the world what a great basketball player he is.
That was really a treat. I think probably the real winners in this have got to be the fans.
Oh, no question, and NBC's ratings just absolutely went through the roof. This is the all-time most-watched basketball series in history.
And with good
well-deserved, yeah,
absolutely. Listen, while we have a little bit of time, we're going to take a quick break here in Chicago. We will be right back with more of Three-Peatable Chicago Celebrates the Bulls in Grant Park in just a moment.
Oh, that's what a wonderful little celebration there. And it was my good fortune to go to the other three celebrations in Grant Park in 96, 97, and 1998. And of course, Chicago just recently celebrated another tremendous celebration, Chicago Sky. So these are kind of, I think, part of what certainly then and now kind of dominated the exuberance of Chicago's public gatherings, Grant Park and other places around the city, which I think is wonderful. Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't look at least one of Chicago's legendary homegrown TV commercials. I certainly remember the ads in Chicago in the early 90s for Scottie Pippen's Dodge on Western Avenue. Of course, who can forget Eagle Insurance Man? And there's so many others that were really products of the Chicago and Chicagoland markets. One of my favorites in a store that was whose legend was explained to me shortly upon arriving in Chicago well over 25 years ago was the meat retailer Moo Oink. Moo Oink was started around 35th and Calumet in 1935 by a Russian immigrant named Barry Levy. And over the decades, its popularity soared, in part because of its low-cost meat and also the way they branded themselves. So a series of very well-known TV commercials and jingles. While the company liquidated its holdings in 2011, the forward-facing retail stores are no longer. It is one of those jingles that once you hear it, you'll never forget it. So without further ado, let's take a look at one of the Moo Oink TV commercials.
We got baby, spare ribs, roast beef, hot links, and more to give. Cube steaks, hot dogs, real tips, ooh, pork chops, chicken wings, and chicken wings too.
Compliment any meal with mustard, turnip, and collard greens, just 29 cents a pound. Try them with smoked picnic ham, 69 cents a pound. Delicious with farm-raised catfish, $1.59 a pound. And great with chicken leg quarters, fixed your favorite way, only 29 cents a pound.
You're probably hungry now. Maybe you're thinking of some encased meats or an encased meat substitute. I'm not sure. One of the things that I think defines Chicago is how Chicago looks on film. You might have your favorite Chicago movie. Maybe it's North by Northwest. Maybe it's one of the other many movies that have used Chicago. I recently rewatched, of all things, Rampage, which with Dwayne Johnson, where Chicago is destroyed in part. I never want to see Chicago destroyed, but it's always good to see Chicago skyline on screen. Certainly one of the movies that for me and many other Chicagoans defines the city is The Fugitive, starring, of course, Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones, and countless others, including some well-known Chicagoans who tend to usually play police officers or detectives. The film was directed by Andrew Davis, who's a South Side native, famous for movies like Stony Island, which is a great exploration of kind of a group of folks coming together to form a band in the South Side. And this was one of his really well-known big budget pictures. And it did tremendous numbers at the box office. And I remember seeing the trailer before it was released and thinking, wow, there's going to be a lot of Chicago in this movie. So we're going to take a look, take us back to 1993, look at one of the official trailers for The Fugitive.
I came home, there was a man in my house. He had an artificial arm.
Are you saying that I killed my wife? Are you saying that I crushed her skull and that I shot her?
Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. We have a fugitive that's been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven ground barring injury is 4 miles an hour. That will give you a radius of 6 miles. What I want out of each and every one of you is a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, or dog house in this area. Checkpoints will go up at 15 miles. Your fugitive's name is Dr. Richard Kimball. Go get him.
Exciting stuff. And I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, wow, this is going to be stupendous. And the movie played for months and months and months. And even though the trailer only hints at it, there are, of course, many famous scenes that take place within the city along the Chicago River. Of course, the L has a guest shot. And so do places like Pullman, Lincoln Park, the Hilton Hotel and Towers on Michigan Avenue. And it's really a great celebration of the city. And of course, not surprisingly, the Chicago Tribune's own Gene Siskel was a favorite. And this review, which came out shortly after the movie premiere, Siskel says, tension-filled Fugitive should be runaway favorite. Our flick of the week is The Fugitive, a truly tension-filled drama and action picture that has been skillfully directed by Andrew Davis and wonderfully acted by Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. So a nice kind of homage to Chicago. And also, I'll point out one of the few examples where the movie is probably better than the source material, which of course was the celebrated 1960s TV show. Interestingly enough, even folks like Clarence Page, who is still a Chicago Tribune op-ed columnist, probably one of the longest serving employees of the Chicago Tribune at this point, along with people like Rick Kogan and others, where Clarence Page decides to talk a little bit about the legal aspects behind the situation with Dr. Kimball, who is the fugitive that Harrison Ford plays in the movie. And I thought this is kind of fun because Clarence goes in and talks to a few retired judges and other folks about whether this whole scenario is plausible or not, which I think is kind of fun. There, of course, were other stories too. One of the places that has changed so dramatically in the past couple of decades is Chicago's public housing. There was a long-standing plan released, the Plan for Transformation in the late 90s, that would result in the demolition of many of the city's largest housing projects, including the Robert Taylor homes and others. And one of the kind of situations that still gave people a very heavy heart with the situations in and around Cabrini Green, which of course has been almost entirely unrecognizable in 2021. But it was the slaying of children and certainly other folks that had garnered such attention, particularly in the early 1990s. And of course, famously or infamously, the depiction of Cabrini Green in the movie Candyman, which of course itself was controversial for a wide range of reasons. So this is another thing that dominated the news headlines, is these kind of conversations about how to address some of these social ills. Of course, there was also changing kind of demographics and changing nature of different communities throughout the city. A place that always interested me was Bridgeport, a neighborhood divided, of course, by the Dan Ryan Expressway since the middle 1960s, and also divided by race as well. And this is a piece that I found from the Tribune in the summer of 1993, titled "Comiskey Park Unites and Divides." Obviously, the creation of a new replacement stadium for Comiskey had been controversial in itself, but also the way in which it divided, it served as a dividing line between black and white. And this article by Steve Johnson, who recently retired from the Chicago Tribune, and John Fountain, another Tribune writer who now teaches journalism, talks a little bit about how the creation of a new park, admittedly just across the street from the old park, was kind of part of this dividing line between black and white. This piece also has a really nice infographic as well that kind of, I kind of find these charming because you kind of get a little bit of a sense of like what is the built environment around there. Of course, the Dan Ryan cuts right down the middle here, and on one side you had Stateway Gardens, Illinois Institute of Technology, which is still very much there, and of course a vast sea of parking lots around Comiskey Park, which, as probably most people watching know, has changed its name several times since 1993. One of the things, if you think about things that define Chicago in the 1990s and now, would certainly be mass transit. Chicago Transit Authority, which was created in 1947 to address the problems of the flagging private companies that had overseen a lot of Chicago transit for decades. Whether it was a streetcar, or whether it was different types of trolleys, surface buses. Obviously, the Great Depression brought about hard times for all of these private transit operators. So Chicago Transit Authority was created by act of the Illinois legislature after World War II to kind of bring all these things together and say, what's next? In the middle of the 1960s, the Red Line, what we now know as the Red Line, was added to the median, or the middle, of the Dan Ryan Expressway, and there are other ambitious programs. But after that project in the middle of the 1960s, the city of Chicago, along with the extension of the Blue Line to O'Hare in 1984, did not have a significant addition to the elevated system until the opening of the Orange Line in 1993. And it was a tremendous moment. Part of the Orange Line route, which probably many of you know, goes along the freight railroad right-of-way, was considered a huge boon to residents of the Southwest Side who were seeking transit to jobs, transit to entertainment, and had wished and dreamed for it for decades. And of course, interestingly enough, a question that I've had from folks in the past is, why does the Orange Line not end with inside Midway Airport? As probably all of you know, you get off at Midway, you walk up the escalator, you walk up another set of escalators, and then you make your way over to Midway Airport. The idea at the time was that it would eventually be expanded all the way to Ford City. One of the gems that I found while doing work for this presentation was that the CTA has started to issue or reissue on their YouTube channel instructional videos. So what we're going to do now is watch an instructional video that tells people about the Orange Line. So you would have watched this video and you would have known all about how to correctly ride the Orange Line.
Passengers faster, safer, and more efficient service to work, shopping, entertainment, and to and from Midway Airport. Remember, if you're a full fare passenger using a magnetic pass, a full fare token, or paying a full fare with exact coins, use the high-speed standalone turnstiles. If you are a reduced fare rider or using a transfer or flash pass, use the turnstile nearest the booth. The Midway route is our first look into what a more efficient and modern rail system can provide, where new technology and improved service combine to make CTA's transportation system the best in the nation. The new Orange Line, leading CTA into the next century.
Friends, you probably watched that and thought, I need to get on the Orange Line. Maybe you watched it, you were on the Orange Line. Who knows? Well, one of the things I wanted to share with everybody, and thank you for watching the talk and enjoying a little bit of Chicago in the early 90s with me, is resources for doing your own work. Maybe you'd like to get on out there, spend a little time online and do some of this work yourself. Take a look at Chicago in the early 90s. The Media Burn website and the folks at Media Burn are really remarkable. They care about and capture so much of Chicago's ephemeral visual history. There's a direct link to the Chicago Slices episodes. Museum of Classic Chicago TV commercials is really a great find. They really archive a lot of this kind of amazing work, including Moo Oink, the Eagle Man commercials, and countless others. A lot of great Bozo the Clown commercials as well. The C. William Brubaker collection, which I shared a few images from, part of the University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC holdings. Thousands of images from decades, most of which documents Chicago and other places that intrigued Mr. Brubaker. Chicago Public Library Digital Collections, always a favorite of mine and folks at the library. Really tremendous set of materials, including the newly released photos from the Department of Urban Renewal. 15,000 plus images documenting this period in Chicago history, and some really great collections of Hyde Park. As folks are interested in looking at Hyde Park history. Chicago Collections is the omnibus kind of website I referred to earlier, chicagocollections.org, and they have a tremendous amount of material searchable by neighborhood, keyword, contributing organization. And Chicago Public Library Digital Collections, that's not a mistake. I just put it there twice so you wouldn't forget about it. You really are going to want to check out their work. So thank you so much for having me. This has been a wonderful experience talking to all of you a little bit about Chicago in the early 90s.
Thank you so much, Max. That's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank Max Grinnell for being here with us. Thanks to CPL Tech Leland Mosley for producing this event, and thanks to all of you for being here. Please visit onebookonechicago.org for information on other upcoming events around the theme Neighborhoods, Our City's Bedrock, including book discussions, films, author events, art programs, and more. Also, visit the CPL YouTube and Facebook pages for on-demand video content, including from this program. Have a great week, everyone.